Imagine being born in 1865, right in the middle of the American Civil War. Already a chaotic time to come into the world. Now imagine you're a baby girl born with soft, dark beard covering your tiny face. That was the reality for Annie Jones. And rather than being hidden away, her unusual appearance would launch her into one of the most famous careers in the circus world. But her story isn't just about spectacle, it's about survival, dignity, and fighting for respect in a world that often mocked her. Annie was born in Virginia, the youngest child of a poor family. Within months of her birth, her parents were approached by a man who saw dollar signs when he looked at her. He offered them a contract to display her. At just 9 months old, Annie was exhibited by P.T. Barnum himself, the legendary showman. They billed her as the infant Esau, a biblical reference to Esau being covered in hair. Imagine it, a baby in a cradle, but with a beard. Crowds flocked to see her, pointing and whispering. Barnum's business sense meant he knew people would pay to stare. But here's where it gets dark. A rival showman actually tried to kidnap Annie when she was a toddler, claiming her parents had abandoned her and she was better off with him. There was a whole custody battle in court over a 2-year-old child because she was considered a profitable attraction. Luckily, Annie's parents won, but the incident showed how little agency performers really had. Annie didn't leave the sideshow life. By age 5, she was touring the country with Barnum's circus, appearing alongside other human curiosities. As she grew, her beard became thicker and fuller, until by her teenage years, she had a long, flowing beard that reached her chest. She was marketed as the bearded lady. But Annie was different from many other sideshow performers. She wasn't content to just stand there and be stared at. She had talents. Annie learned to play multiple instruments, sang beautifully, and was well-spoken. Barnum quickly realized she could charm audiences not just with her appearance, but with her personality. At just 16, Annie married Richard Elliott, another sideshow performer, but the marriage didn't last. A few years later, she remarried, this time to William Donovan, a professional sideshow talker, basically the announcer who hyped up the acts. Together, they toured Europe. Tragically, William died young. Annie, devastated, returned to America, but continued working. Later, she married a man named Richard Elliott. Yes, another Richard, but not the same as the first one. Here's something people don't often know. Annie used her fame to advocate for others. By the late 1800s, the term freak was commonly slapped on performers like her, but Annie hated it. She thought it was cruel and demeaning. She petitioned against the word freak being used in advertising and wanted performers treated with dignity. That was a radical for her time. Sideshow performers were often exploited, underpaid, and treated as less than human. Annie stood up and said, "We are people first." By the 1890s, Annie Jones was one of Barnum and Bailey's star attractions. She toured constantly, meeting royalty, celebrities, and millions of spectators. She was respected within the circus community, not just as a curiosity, but as a professional. Sadly, Annie's life was cut short. She died of tuberculosis in 1902 at just 37 years old. But in her short life, she became one of the most famous bearded women in history. What makes Annie's story remarkable isn't just the beard, it's how she carried herself. In a time when people like her were ridiculed, she built a career, demanded respect, and even challenged the language society used to describe her. She was more than a sideshow act. She was a woman who refused to let the world define her by her difference. So next time you hear the phrase, the bearded lady, remember Annie Jones, not a curiosity, but as a pioneer who stood tall in a world that wanted her to hide. Doesn't she sound amazing? I would have loved to have met her in real life. I bet she had some amazing stories. What do you think about her? Let me know in the comments.